In India particularly, political science and arts degrees sometimes get a bad reputation for being like a non-career focused pathway. What would you say to the students and the parents who are watching this video who are unsure about whether or not it's a practical path?
I hear what you're saying, and I would say to students and parents who are worried about this, don't worry. Every single student who's done a politics degree, who's done an arts degree, a social science degree, everyone gets good jobs.
Hi everyone, welcome back to IUS YouTube channel. Today we are so excited to have with us Dr. Ben Wellings, Associate Dean International at Monash University's Faculty of Arts and widely respected voice in global politics and nationalism studies. He's presented his research at NATO, worked with UK Parliament, and regularly appears on major media like BBC and ABC, and in India he also appeared on Doordarshan television. Dr. Wellings, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, you've spent years studying nationalism and political identity. For students, especially in today's world of polarization, what does nationalism mean and why is it still so relevant?
It's a really great question, and I love the word still in there. Why is it still so relevant? Because for a long time people might say, well, don't we have globalization? Shouldn't that mean that nationalism has become a thing of the past because we're all mixing and blending? But actually globalization is the reason that nationalism has come back, right? So when we think social scientifically, we look at patterns. If we look at the last 200 years, we can see a pattern that every time we go into a period of economic and social integration, there's a reaction afterwards. So what's happening now, what we're living through at this moment, is a reaction against the globalization that we've experienced in the last 20, 30 years.
I see. Yeah, that brings up all the puzzle pieces together, and that's a good explanation about it. So when a student studies political science or the international relations at Monash, what's the experience like? How do you blend theory with real-world political events?
Great. That combination of theory and up-to-date analysis is really crucial, right? Because, as you say, international relations and politics, very fast-moving subjects. So year on year, everything is going to change. At the same time, we know that certain things remain constant underneath that. We know that there is always war. We know that nations like to trade with each other. We know about climate change. We know that that is happening. But the different reactions that different groups in society, which could be nations, but also the politicians that lead those nations, they can have very different responses that can change. So we're always saying to students, we'll give you a really solid foundation in the theories of politics and international relations, but at the same time we say, how does that theory relate to the real events that you've experienced today? And it's that interplay between the particular evidence and the general theory that makes Monash University students stand out.
I see. So that also brings me up to a follow-up that last couple of months and particularly a few years have been a bit active in terms of global politics and all the situations. So how has that been inculcated into Monash's courses? Like, how does a typical day at this course looks like when we have such hot events around the world that can be discussed a lot?
Yes, all right. So one of the things that we try and do is give students the means to talk to each other around contentious subjects.
Okay.
So we know, for example, that there is a war in the Middle East.
Right.
We know that there is a war in Ukraine. We know that China's position in the international system can be very, very difficult.
Right.
But it's particularly something like the war in the Middle East that has reflections back into Australian society because of the multicultural composition of Australian society and the strong feelings that people have about this particular conflict. So what we try and do is say, we are going to talk about these difficult things, but we need to talk about it in a particular way. We need to be respectful of each other, right? Very difficult to do, of course, in times of conflict because precisely people's political identities become very heightened. So we try and put the theoretical guardrails around this, and we try and leave space to say, well, look, some people are going to feel very strongly about this. Okay, but at the end of the day, we are trying to educate students, and we are trying to offer them ways to understand the often very distressing events that they are witness to, and maybe actually impacting their very families.
Right.
Yeah. So the classroom becomes a space for respectful engagement around these issues and around these ideas. And of course, these can test even the most experienced educator, but our role is to help students understand these events that are taking place and shaping the history that we're living through.
Right, Professor. So in India particularly, political science and arts degrees sometimes get a bad reputation for being like a non-career focused pathway. What would you say to the students and the parents who are watching this video who are unsure about whether or not it's a practical path?
I hear what you're saying, and I would say to students and parents who are worried about this, don't worry. Every single student who's done a politics degree, who's done an arts degree, a social science degree, everyone gets good jobs and they get good salaries. So we did a little bit of finding around before I came here to India. Arts graduates start in Australia slightly above the average wage. Okay. By the end of their careers, they could be doubling that. All right. And the kind of careers that they get into are public life broadly defined. So if you imagine that they might want to work in the civil service, if you imagine that they might want to work for a government, they might want to work for a charity or an NGO, and that could be happening domestically, it could be happening in the international sphere. But I know that some of the students that I've taught have gone on to work for the Australian government, they've gone to work for Prime Minister and Cabinet, and they work in the Foreign Affairs Service as well. So we really are providing students with absolutely the best possibility to do the things they're interested in. So the key thing that I always think is that you've got to pursue your interests, because you're not going to do something interesting if you're not following your own interests. So believe in yourself, believe in the world-class education that Monash will be able to provide you or your children, and have confidence that they will come out doing something that they absolutely love.
Professor, I'm intrigued, and it's like a childish question from my end, but can someone become a politician after doing this degree?
Absolutely, yeah. We've had it. We've had that. We've
Oh,
had
you have?
the
Okay.
yes, yeah. The previous premier of the state of Victoria, right? So at the state level, did a politics degree at Monash.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, and he came back to do a launch last year in 2024, and what I thought was really funny was that he obviously hadn't done all of his essays, and he was apologising for that quite often. Now we could see out of the window of the room that he was in this big heart hospital that he and his government had set up on the edges, because Monash is a really strong medical school. So we got this heart hospital, and every now and then he'd say, oh yeah, my government helped open this hospital. But then he'd also say, I'm really sorry about like not handing that essay in. And he kind of clearly felt sort of still guilty and bad about it, but I wasn't going to let it off the hook. But it shows that if you want to be very direct, it's happened. It's usually a little more diffuse. And what I would say to people contemplating this kind of career is you don't necessarily immediately sort of go into something that is your actual thing that 30 years from now you would look back and say that was my career. There is a little bit of movement, particularly afterwards, and it's true that there'd be uncertainty for students and parents around what that might be. Particularly if you're international, you might stay in Australia, you might come back, but have faith, right? This is where people get to do what they really like doing, and they always have interest in careers. Arts graduates often end up in management because they can communicate very well.
Right, Professor. So what kind of skills do the students develop through your faculty, and how do these skills apply beyond politics or policy?
Absolutely. Another great question. So everyone pursues a discipline that they're interested in. It could be history, it could be politics, it could be criminology, media, whatever.
Right.
That is the thing that drives you forward, because you're really interested in the content.
Right.
What you're getting throughout that is meta skills. So you're getting the problem solving, the critical thinking, the teamwork, the collaboration, the leadership skills that turn you into one of tomorrow's leaders. And so it's those kind of, sometimes they get called soft skills, but again, I come back to communication. You can't underestimate the value of being able to communicate articulately, particularly in a big organization. So if you're going into a consultancy, for instance, or if you're going to work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, you need to write well, you need to speak well. You might be speaking for your country, so you better make sure it's, your grammar's okay. And so you can do all those kind of things. And it sort of doesn't matter what actual discipline you do in that sense from skills acquisition, because you're going to get that from any kind of arts and social science degrees. So that's what we are inculcating in students. Training is perhaps too strong a word. That's what we're inculcating in students, and we know that employers love that. We know from survey research, they tell us, like if you look at the World Economic Forum, they say top 10 job skills, 9 out of those 10 you get from doing an arts degree. So you can encourage anyone to look those up. We also, I just know anecdotally as well, when students come back to me for a job reference and then the employers come to me, the things the employers ask me, can this person think critically? Can they work in groups? Can they also work unsupervised? And these are the types of things that the learning environment in arts and social sciences is so good at creating that sort of lifelong learner who is self-motivated and can drive their own career forward through the interest in the world around them.
I see, Professor. I see. So now we are headed to the last question. For the students who are watching this video, and this is for who care about the world and want to make a difference, what message would you leave them with?
Okay. Arts degrees are a really terrific way of making a difference, because they will provide students with the analytical skills to be able to do that, and it does it in 3 ways. So first of all, the social science background will help us understand the situation that we're living in right now. Okay, and let's just take something like inequality. We know that inequality is getting greater. Right? We can think about that globally. We can think about it in India, in Australia, wherever. The gap between rich and poor is growing. So we might be able to say, well, empirically that's happening. Right? We've got the tools to know that that's happening. But then we start to think a bit philosophically, and we say, well, where do we want to go? What would we ideally want to do? And so then we start to think, well, how can we think normatively? Right? We're outside of the realm of empirics here, but we want to use all those strong philosophical traditions, whether they're Western or Eastern. We draw upon those to say that ideal society ought to look something like this. And then we can think politically. We can say, well, how do we get there? Right? We might have come up with an ideal society, but some people will disagree with us, for sure. Some people will not want us to reach that goal, whatever that is. But how do we bring people along? How do we either persuade them that our view is not only best but good for them too, or how do we maneuver around people that want to put things in our way? Because there'll be lots of those people. So that's the kind of thinking that we can do in terms of knowing where we are now, knowing where we want to be, and knowing how to get there.
Yeah, those are some powerful words, Professor. Thank you for those insights. And for those of you watching this, I would say you guys are the next gen world leaders. And Professor Ben just gave you a lot of advice that you should actually inculcate and consider taking this course at Monash University. Thank you, Professor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.